The activity over the last week has been associated with changing out Discovery's #1 auxiliary power unit, which was removed last Saturday and sent back to the vendor for analysis. A new one was on hand and ready for installation, and we have video of that unit being prepared for transportation to the launch pad.
Discovery Houston, SIMO air-to-ground voice checks, Eddie Reed.
The auxiliary power unit, which presented the problem, was found to have a chip in one of the valves that's involved with regulating the flow of hydrazine. Therefore, what we found was a one-time hardware problem and not an overall design or engineering concern. This is the replacement auxiliary power unit being prepared for transportation. In the back, there is the one that was taken out and was shipped back to the vendor for analysis.
Altimeter setting of 30.
That is the aft area of Discovery where the replacement auxiliary power unit will be installed, and adjacent is the external tank and the solid rocket boosters.
What we're working, manual right now is a single string for TACANs.
The replacement
We're planning on going
unit was transported to the pad on Saturday and was connected on Sunday. Most of that work was completed in time to give most of the team the rest of the Easter Sunday period off.
Primary TACAN back up again. We may yet declare banjo.
After the installation, the replacement auxiliary power unit was hot-fired, was run for a little over 5 minutes to verify that there would not be a repeat of the problem that we had before, and to give it the same amount of runtime as the other auxiliary power units which are on board Discovery. And that test went fine.
Okay, Steve, we copy. NCDR OTC, air-to-ground 1.
This now is going into the aft area for the installation. In parallel with this activity, the payload bay doors of Discovery were closed and the batteries for the Hubble Space Telescope were back in the battery lab being charged. This procedure had not been done vertically before. It had been done in the hangars, so that procedure was modified with some contingency time built in to allow for any problems should they be encountered, this being a new approach. However, the change out and the retest went very well. Most of that contingency time was not used, and with the Hubble battery charging getting started a little bit earlier, then all things came together to make it possible to move up our launch date from the 25th to the 24th. Again, we're still aiming toward an 8:31 a.m. liftoff. We have no constraints with the shuttle or weather-wise. Picking up now in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, T-minus 20 minutes and counting. Purge of Discovery's 3 fuel cells is now underway. The data processing system engineer has confirmed that the onboard computers are in the process of making the transition to the terminal countdown configuration. We do have 3 COLAs today during the period, which extends from 8:31 to 2:43. There would be a collision avoidance quotient that would begin at 8:58:30 this morning and run for 1 minute. There would be another one at 10:32 this morning, which would last for 5.5 minutes, and another one at 12:12 this afternoon, which would last for 1 minute. That last one, however, would be academic in light of the fact that the crew time in the cockpit of Discovery would expire at 11 a.m.
DEPP here to ground 1.
All activity continues on schedule as we proceed toward the next hold at T-minus 9 minutes. The primary ascent software is now in the Ops 101 mode, which is the primary launch program, and Commander Schreiber will now configure the backup flight system computer to match that configuration. T-minus 18 minutes, 20 seconds and counting.
MTD STM 212. Go ahead, STM. Step 916. Will that be performed or not performed, sir? That's not performed. Copy. OTC, CDR, PFS is an Ops 1, no unexpected messages. Copy that, thank you. And PLT, OTC. Go ahead, Sam. Okay, configure pass and VFS horizontal fit displays per your checklist, please.
Commander Schreiber has reported that the backup flight system is now in the proper mode. And we just saw astronaut Dan Brandenstein flying the shuttle training aircraft, doing the weather reconnaissance and assessing the conditions at the shuttle landing facility in the event of a return to launch site abort. He's reporting that data to support astronaut Ken Reichler and astronaut Jim Weatherby here in the firing room. T-minus 17 minutes and counting.
Go ahead.
The VFS pre-flight uplink load is complete.
Copy. CVFS.
CVFS copies.
Dumping of the Ops 101 program stored in the memory of one of the 4 redundant general purpose computers is now underway. That will take about 7 minutes to complete. Engineers will be examining that data for anything that would miscompare.
Go ahead, PLT.
Okay, horizontal fit. Yeah, Stan, horizontal fit config is complete, and we verified the OHM's interconnect config is also verified.
Okay, copy that.
Pilot Charlie Bolden has been in the process of configuring the cockpit switches for launch, and he's reporting that most of that configuration is complete. The airframe engineer is checking all of the critical movable aerosurface driver currents and is positioning all the hydraulic systems for activation.
Here, TDSRO, go ahead, sir. 969, KFC area is clear for launch.
Roger, copy. OTC PLT, MPS helium reconfig is complete.
Copy that. MPS, OTC.
MPS, go.
Okay, you verify 945, 946.
Verified.
And 47?
Yeah, yes, sir.
Copy that. Double OS.
Go ahead.
Okay, configuring OHM's RCS cross feed for flight.
At this time, yes.
Copy.
Pilot Charlie Bolden has reported that the helium system reconfiguration has been completed. This opens helium isolation valves necessary for the in-flight purges of the engines.
Checking, sir.
Water levels in the water spray boilers are now being checked, and they are being verified to be sufficient for the mission. The NASA test director has asked Houston Flight to send their pre-flight uplink command to the orbiter's backup flight system. These loads are sent from the Mila tracking station here at KSC and put the 5th general purpose computer in the proper configuration for launch.
NTDSO 212.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Page 813, step 0965, normal track.
Copy.
Configuration of the cross-feed valves between the orbital maneuvering system and the reaction control system propellant tanks is being performed. The orbiter test conductor has asked pilot Charlie Bolden to report the quantities in the reaction control system propellant tanks. Meanwhile, the booster test conductor has been asked to start the gaseous nitrogen purge of the aft skirts. This flow of inert gas ensures that no explosive or flammable gases can accumulate in the bottom of the solid rocket boosters prior to their ignition.
101, right, 100.
We're at the point now where all non-essential personnel are being cleared from the launch danger area. The white room has been closed out for flight, and the closeout crew has departed back to the roadblock.
MTD, STM-31 Step 986, sir. Copy. And FCP, OTC, here to ground 1.
FCP?
Yeah, your fuel cell purge complete?
Will be shortly.
Copy. Countdown clock will hold at T-minus 9 minutes and 4 minutes.
OTC, CFCP.
Go ahead.
Our fuel cell purge is complete and we're ready for fuel cell load adjustment.
Okay, APD and ECL and FCP, adjust your fuel cell loads for the Ds.
EPD copy. FCP copies.
ECL copies. OTC, CVFS.
Go ahead.
T-minus 20 minutes, CPC dump is complete.
Copy that. CMQC F979. Copy 979.
T-minus 12 minutes and counting, we've received word from White Sands that the weather reconnaissance aircraft there has advised that with the wind that they're seeing, there is still ample margin out there to cover any contingency in the event that we should have an abort once around. He has reported his observations to the chairman of the mission management team, Brewster Shaw, and Brewster has determined that weather at White Sands is go for launch. We've also received a verification that all of the contingency support is ready and that the aircraft and emergency teams are on station to support the launch today.
Copy that.
The T-minus 20-minute dump of the orbiter general purpose computer memory has been
Copy.
completed. We have no unexpected errors in that report. Now T-minus 11 minutes and counting.
Load adjust is complete. Copy that. ECL. ECL OTC.
Go ahead.
Yeah, can you agree with fuel cell APD?
That's affirmative.
Copy. All personnel on channel 212, this OTC, discontinue all non-mandatory LDB traffic for remainder of count.
T-minus 10 minutes and counting, about 1 minute now from the last planned built-in hold in the STS-31 launch countdown this morning. The flow rate of the conditioned air fed into the orbiter's payload bay is being reduced and will be verified at about 180 pounds per minute, which is the figure desired for launch. Standing by now to Go into the hold at T-minus 9, 3, 2, 1, T-minus 9 minutes and holding for 10 minutes.
Hands on clock will resume on my mark. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. QLS auto sequence has been initiated.
Now into the final phase of this morning's launch countdown with the initiation of the ground launch sequencer. Standing by now for a request from the orbiter test conductor to Houston Flight to send stored program commands, which are the final update on the antenna alignment.
PLT was that, OTC was that for the PLT?
That's affirmative. Configure fuel cell essential bus source switches, please.
That's in work, Stan.
Thank you.
OTC PLT, essential bus connection is complete.
Copy that, thank you.
Next significant event coming very shortly here with the orbiter crew access arm being retracted away from the vehicle into the launch configuration. This arm can be re-extended in less than half a minute if that's necessary. T-minus 7 minutes, 30 seconds and counting.
QLS is go for orbiter access arm retract.
In about 45 seconds, the orbiter test conductor will give pilot Charlie Bolden a go to perform the auxiliary power unit pre-start. Bolden will configure switches in the cockpit to put the APUs in the ready to start configuration. The APUs will be started at T-minus 5 minutes. Go for APU pre-start will come in about 10 seconds.
You want to start your APU? Hydraulic trip chart recorders, please. Recorder started. And PLT OTC?
Go ahead.
You can perform your APU pre-start, please.
That's in work.
The APUs provide hydraulic power to the orbiter. Standing by for confirmation that the APU pre-start is complete.
Pre-start's complete. 3 great talkbacks.
Thank you, Charlie.
Pilot Bolden reporting back that the pre-start operations are complete. T-minus 5 minutes, 30 seconds. Mission Control has transmitted the signal to start the flight recorders. The 2 recorders will collect measurements of the shuttle system's performance during the flight for playback later after the vehicle is in orbit. Coming up on T-minus 5 minutes and counting.
QLS is go for orbiter APU start.
And we have a go for APU start.
APUs, please.
That's in work, Stanley.
And CDR OTC?
Go ahead.
You can reconfigure heaters, please.
Commander Schreiber asked to reconfigure the orbiter heaters. He'll report when that's complete.
Heaters are reconfigured.
Thank you.
Ground launch sequencer has terminated liquid oxygen replenish to the external tank and is now initiating the LOX drain back.
And OTC, PLT, APU start is complete, and so far so good.
There are the good words. 3 APUs in good health. About to start a profile test. Profile test of the orbiter's aero surfaces. The orbiter flight control surfaces are being moved through a pre-programmed pattern, and we'll have a gimbling of the main engines, which will follow. Final purge sequence of the main engines is in work. We're now transferring to internal power and switching off the orbiter's ground power supply. At this point, Discovery is being powered by the onboard fuel cells. T-minus 3 minutes and counting.
Let's go for ET-LO2 pressurization.
Go for pressurizing the external tank. All systems are go for launch.
OTC 212.
Go ahead, OTC.
Okay, clear caution and warning memory and verify no unexpected errors.
Okay, we have no caution and warning annunciation, Stan. That's
Okay.
complete.
Thank you, Charlie.
Standing by now. Here is the retraction of the gaseous oxygen vent hood. The gimbling of the main engines is complete, and the aero surfaces have been verified that they are positioned for launch. The external tank now is reported to be at flight pressure.
OTC 212. Close and lock your visors and initiate your O2 flow, and you all have a good trip.
Roger that, 10 word.
Let's just go for ET-LH2 pressurization.
Bringing the LH2 pressurization up to flight levels. 90 seconds away from launch now.
1 minute, 30 seconds.
And the LH2 tank now reported at flight pressure. Both tanks, liquid and oxygen, now ready to flow propellants.
One minute.
Sound suppression water system is now being armed, which will flow water onto the mobile launcher platform at the rate of 900,000 gallons a minute, beginning at T-minus 16 seconds. The heaters on the booster joints are now being turned off. The orbiter computers have positioned the vent doors to the launch configuration. Standing by now for a go for auto sequence start. T-minus 33.
Countdown clock will hold at T-minus 31 seconds due to a failure.
We've had a hold. We do not know at this time what the problem is. We'll be standing by for word, but the clock is holding at T-minus 31 seconds due to a system failure.
And NTDSD, it's the LO2 outboard fill and drain valve. NTD is CMPL. Go ahead. It's LCC MPS 8. And PV9 outboard fill and drain closed power is off. It should be on. A recommendation? And NTD, that we're in a no-go situation. We should have our open power, and we do not. Or excuse me, our closed power. FP. And MPS, can we verify that the valve is closed? Negative. We right now show a open position. We cannot verify the valve is closed.
FP, this is MPS.
Go MPS. Yeah, with an LCC reads, if we have the closed power on and the open position off, we can cycle one time and try to pick up the closed position, but we never picked up the closed power. Okay, in MPS, we have a message that we were blocked by a prerequisite sequence, GCL-18.
What has happened is the ground launch sequencer would not hand off to the orbiter's computers to complete the count because the liquid oxygen fill and drain valve was showing off when it should be on. An analysis of the problem has begun.
We've been holding 2 minutes. SDE, this is CMPS. We're going to make an attempt to cursor that valve closed. We've got the prereq set off. If this works, we should be in good shape. I copy. Proceed. It work.
We have 7 minutes of runtime available on the auxiliary power units. We've been holding now about 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
NTD, this is CMPS. The valve's closed. We'll go.
There's the confirmation that we have successfully
you're in the
recycled.
The pickup terminal sequence MPS. That's affirmative, so we'll go. We're in good shape. Okay, you have a go to proceed. GLS, pick up the count immediately.
I copy.
Mark.
GLS, let's go for auto sequence start.
We are go for start.
25.
Booster hydraulic power units have started.
20.
Sound suppression water system has started.
15.
T-minus 13 seconds.
10.
T-minus 10, go for main engine start. We are go for main engine start. T-minus 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery with the Hubble Space Telescope, our window on the universe.
Mission Control, Houston.
Roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
The roll maneuver puts the vehicle in the proper launch plane. Guidance officer confirms a good roll maneuver. Engines now throttling back. The throttle down maneuver assists in reducing the aerodynamic loads on Discovery as it passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure. Velocity now 1,200 feet per second. Discovery downrange 3 nautical miles.
Discovery, go at throttle up.
All 3 engines now throttled back up.
Go throttle up.
Engines at 104%. The go at throttle up call signifies that all systems are performing well. All 3 auxiliary power units look good. Discovery's velocity now 2,300 feet per second and is downrange 8 nautical miles. Standing by for SRB separation. And both solid rocket boosters have separated. Discovery's velocity now 4,300 feet per second at a downrange distance of 35 nautical miles. Booster officer reports all 3 engines stable at 104% performance.
Discovery Houston, performance is nominal. And Discovery 2-engine Bengurir.
The two-engine Ben Guerir call means that Discovery could reach the transatlantic abort site at Ben Guerir on two engines if it were necessary.
Copy, nominal performance, two-engine Ben.
Velocity now 5,000 feet per second. Discovery 60 nautical miles away from the launch site. All systems continuing to perform well aboard Discovery. Velocity now is 6,200 feet per second. Downrange 100 nautical miles. The Environmental Systems Officer reports the FES is operating well. That is the flash evaporator system that provides cooling to Discovery's systems.
Discovery Houston, negative return, press to ATO, select Banjul.
Negative return, press to ATO.
That last call means that Discovery cannot return to the launch site at Kennedy. However, enough energy has been achieved to reach a safe orbit on two engines should one shut down. And Discovery could also reach the backup transatlantic abort site at Banjul if that were necessary. All three engines are stable at 104%. Auxiliary power units all performing well. Discovery's velocity is 8,400 feet per second at a downrange distance of 175 nautical miles.
Discovery, press to MECO.
Press to MECO.
The press to MECO call signifies that Discovery could make the main engine cutoff target.
Discovery, droop Banjul 109.
Droop 109.
And that last call means that Discovery could reach the Banjul transatlantic site on one engine at 109%. All three engines still looking good. Discovery's velocity 12,000 feet per second. Downrange 290 nautical miles at an altitude of 60 nautical miles. Guidance officer confirms that navigation is good.
Discovery, single engine Banjul 104.
Single engine Banjul 104.
Officer reports all three engines stable.
I'd like to welcome you to our STS-31 post-launch news conference. Our players from your left are KSC Launch Director Bob Seek and George T. Sassine, Director of Shuttle Engineering. We'll start off with Mr. Seek.
Well, we're obviously pleased to be here after a long effort to get the Hubble, the shuttle, into orbit, and that was accomplished today through the work of a lot of people. The countdown process since yesterday really went well. We were concerned about the weather early on. The severe weather which we thought might impact us stayed away, and the launch conditions and the landing conditions were all acceptable when we went into terminal count. And we really had very few problems. We stayed on the timeline all night. We did send a crew into the launch pad to verify the setting of some circuit breakers on the ground system. but we ingressed the crew on time, went right into terminal count, had one what would appear to be funny or glitch on a computer display, which was an explained condition due to the computer timing at that moment, and went into terminal count ready to go on time. As you know, we stopped at 31 seconds, which again is a reminder of the complexity of the system, but also that the systems work whenever all the prerequisites are not satisfied, and we stop and we hold and we evaluate the condition, and if we can fix it, we continue on. If not, we don't launch. Well, today we were able to fix it. The software sensed that a valve was not in the right position, which it was not because the command hadn't gotten through. The engineers responsible for that system backed up the command, positioned the valve correctly, verified that everything else in their system was in the proper configuration, and we picked up the count and launched safely and successfully. And I think that's a testimony to the way the system should work. The hardware, the software, and the people, and it all has to be right before we commit to launch. And that was done to everyone's satisfaction today. So we feel good about that. We feel good about the hardware that we put on orbit, and we're looking forward to the results.
Ted?
I had hoped to be able to come over here today and tell you absolutely nothing about a totally boring, perfect launch count. I almost made it. And it was really a very routine count. Everything worked beautifully. The problem that got us in the dying minutes, I will see if I can explain without making it too complicated. About 12 years ago or so, when the liquid oxygen system was in its infancy and people were thinking about it, they worried about closing the fill and drain valves, which are fairly good sized valves, against any sort of pressure. So we built a little set of logic in the software called prerequisite logic, and it looks at 3 or 4 things and says all these got to be right before you could do something. And that's what was looking at the LOX outboard fill and drain valve when this happened. About 3 weeks ago, another event caught up to us. We had an old rusty water pipe in one of the outbuildings that sprayed on a motor control assembly that had 4,000 volts in it. Well, the explosion caused a pretty good ringing on the buses around here, and it took down an LPS control room in about 2 cycles. So we had a whole bunch of what-if meetings, as anybody would do, and said, what are you going to do if this catches you at the very wrong time? And the liquid oxygen people made it loud and clear. If we can't drain within 9 minutes of stopping flow, the system will do what is called geysering. And I'm sure you're all familiar with geysers and how they work. And that will destroy the tank. The only other choice you would have to do then without LPS is open this valve and dump that head of LOX into an absolutely empty pipe. Now, you're all familiar with water hammer in your houses. LOX is heavier than water. And we have a great big filter, and we could undoubtedly rupture some plumbing if we did that. So the fix was to put a purge in that line and put a small gas pad in there. And we did that by hand after the inboard valve was closed and before the outboard valve was closed. The ground launch sequencer sent its closed outboard command at 48 seconds. The LOX console says you don't meet my prerequisite because you have this purge valve open. And so it said don't close. Long ago we had ceased to worry about closing that valve against purge pressure, but we had never really fixed the software because it never bothered us before. And I guess this time we violated one of our own cardinal rules that says never ever make a software change unless you can run it many, many times. And we keep getting reminded that this is the most complicated toy ever built by mankind. And all the complications doesn't fly, half of it stays here on Earth. So anyway, to reaffirm Bob's point, though, the software would have safed us completely. Of course, we wouldn't have launched. So we're going back again and carefully review some cardinal rules and carefully review why we're never going to deviate from them again. That's really about all I got to tell you about it. It was About 10 seconds after it happened, everybody looked around and said, oh boy, were we dumb. And they knew exactly what to do, and they did it. And that's kind of our story. I think the launch was beautiful. I hope the mission will be an equal success, because to me, this is probably the shuttle program's most significant mission. I'm a real enthusiast of the Hubble Space Telescope. That's really all I have to tell you. I'm sorry it wasn't more boring.
We can take questions at this time. Please wait for the mic and give your name and affiliation. Dan.
Dan Billow, WESH-TV. So, George, did you have to fix something, or did you have to just realize, oh, it's okay, let's tell it that it doesn't need to do anything?
We simply bypassed the prerequisite step in the logic and sent the close command. We didn't have to fix anything.
Harry, 1 second, please.
Harry Colcom, Aviation Week. Ted, was this how did you send it? What method did you use? Did you manually bypass the computer or what?
No. Our launch processing computerized system has a bunch of ways you can manually send commands. It is not a switch with a wire. The guy puts his cursor on the valve and presses the button, says enter, and the cursor sends the command through the computer system.
Phil.
Okay. Philip Chen for Astronomy. Bob, we've seen the shuttle as a fantastic machine, but also as a machine where everything has to be working 100% every time it lifts off. You have to have all 3 APUs operational in both high and low speed modes, and every other system has to be operational. Can we get to the stage when we're like an aircraft, where we have a list of things which aren't as necessary, or where we have redundancies, so we can only need, say, 2 out of 3 APUs operational?
I don't think you'll ever see the program to the point where we will give up our redundancy on the ground where it has to do with a critical system like APUs, main propulsion, and life support systems. The redundancy is built into the vehicle. It was designed that way to be used on orbit to complete the mission and to land safely. And our approach to that is we're going to save it for that, and we're going to make it 100% before it leaves the ground. And I think the record shows that when we have stopped, scrubbed, or terminated the launch count, it's for those reasons that you did not want to launch that day.
We'll take one more question here before moving to Houston. Dan?
Yes, Bob, when were you or was the test director notified that this system was not closed, and was that the proper time to have been notified, or should you have known minutes before that it wasn't closed?
No, the command doesn't get sent until within -1 minute, and when the command didn't get through, we all got instantaneous notification that it didn't make it, and of course we have the built-in hold point of 31 seconds to work the problem. And that part of the system all worked. Is what Ted said was if there's any deficiency in a training simulation sometime back in the flow prior to going into launch countdown, this would have been the time to catch it, so we wouldn't have had hold in our launch count.
Do we have a question at JSC?
Okay, this is the Johnson Space Center, John Getter.
John Getter, KHOU-TV. For George, if I understood you correctly there, you were saying that essentially you got caught because you violated some of your own practices and rules and explained why they're so important. I'd like to ask you a question we've asked astronauts and others periodically, and that is, are you at all concerned that there is any kind of a tendency developing to start skirting any of those rules, bending them, or trying to get around them when they're not convenient?
Well, the first answer is a direct no. That tendency has not been apparent. The rule we actually violated was one of sufficient magnitude of testing to catch the problem. When you make a software change, as the folks in Houston will tell you, you must run this many, many times, because there are oddities about software changes that you don't always get the first time through. And the basic rule we violated is we did not test it enough. And we're going to go back and reaffirm how much it actually takes before you can do something like this. But no, there has not been a laxity here about relaxing those kind of rules. Maybe the rule was not quite stringent enough to begin with.
Do we have any additional questions from JSC?
That's all the questions from JSC.
Coming back to KSC, Jim.
Jim Banky, Florida Today. Bob or Ted, could either of you review some of the other problems that occupied your attention before you got to this T-31 and talk a little bit about the ice and this plug and whatnot that was going on?
Well, I can address the ice issue, and in all our launch count procedures, we do a visual ice inspection remotely with television and hands-on crew, and the criteria is essentially no ice that could potentially impact the orbiter in the sensitive critical tile areas. What was different in this launch count, we noticed a little larger buildup of ice on the hydrogen umbilical between the orbiter and the tank. We always see some ice there. If it is of the nature that it's soft or it's mostly frost, then we just, we essentially ignore it from the standpoint of being a threat. This time there was more of it out there, so it attracted more attention. We suspect that the ice and the frost, probably more like slush, was building up due to a leak around a closeout plug that is inserted in the insulative foam because that's an access area for a ground checkout tool. And the plug was put in, and in the first tank cycle, we saw very little ice around there, so we felt the plug is holding good. Obviously, the cold shock, as it were, on that line opened up some gaps around the plug, and we got more ice this time. So the discussion was, do we have too much ice? Would it be an unsafe condition? The answer to that was no. And secondly, would we be concerned about the plug coming out? And the answer to that was no. But that's why that's why it took up. It had the management involvement routine, as it were, in launch count, and that's the only one, as Ted would characterize the launch count from the standpoint of training. And non-standard work, it was uneventful.
Paul?
Paul Hooverston, USA Today. Question for Ted. You've got Columbia sitting out on the pad, and do you expect to have enough of these software tests run before you launch that one, or you're going to be cutting it close, or what's going to happen?
I may just pull this procedure if there isn't time. The procedure was a response to what I would call almost a non-problem. The power system around this place is pretty well built, and we rarely blow up 4,000 kVA motor control assemblies. Most of the time, our uninterruptible power system saves us. This time it had some extra positive ringing, and half our units are 10 years old, and they just didn't protect. I really don't think it's prudent to put a lot of effort into planning for a total LPS loss between 31 seconds and T0. And I think if we look at this procedure, we'll just probably pull it for now until we can put the proper testing on it.
Beth?
Beth Dickey with Reuters. Ted, I'm just a little unclear on why it is this software change was not tested enough. Is that because your rules don't require a certain number of tests, or were you trying to save time?
And I guess the answer to both of them has to be yes. We probably have not specifically specified the number of tests. I know we have a certain amount we run, but maybe we ought to say there ought to be more. And it was a little late in the game when all this happened. And really, all of those experts who should have been smart enough just weren't. Still want to emphasize, the software safed the system like it's supposed to. You can't make it unsafe. And the only thing would have happened, we wouldn't have launched. No.
Gentleman in the back row.
Kevin Dunn from NBC News. I'm a little mixed up. Was this purge valve on the shuttle, on the tank, or on the ground? Where is the physical position of the valve that got?
I'm going to guess, but I believe it's on the ground.
It's not a problem on the shuttle now. They left it behind them.
Well, it wouldn't have been a problem anyway, no matter where it was.
I mean, it's not a sticky valve sitting up in
No.
the
It was commanded to be open deliberately. And when it got down to the final command for the outboard fill and drain, that logic wanted to be commanded closed. Yeah. There was nothing wrong with the valve.
Do we have any additional questions?
Hi, do we know what the orbital parameters, sorry, Nick Booth from the Observer in London. Do we know what the orbital parameters are, and is there any engineering data from the mirror? How is it, what's its shape, anything like that?
We can get the orbital parameters from JSC, Nick. Do we have any additional questions?
Please also go.
Roger, Houston, we copy.
And this is Hubble telescope control.
Story. Looks good so far.
It's great, Lauren.
And we see first motion. Looks good.
And as the crew just confirmed, we're seeing both blankets beginning to unfurl on the port side solar array.
So far we see good smooth motion both sides.
And we got TV down here, Lauren.
Roger that.
It'll take approximately 7 to 8 minutes for this activity to be completed. The array is driven fairly slowly.
And story camera B also has a picture of this.
Thank you.
The solar arrays are driven out of their cassettes by bistems, which are at each side of the array. The bistem is visible in the television being downlinked from the spacecraft at this time. It's attached at the end of the array to a spreader bar, and the spreader bar is in turn attached to the array, which literally pulls the array out of the cassette, which held it packaged during launch. When fully deployed, both of the arrays together produce about 6,000 volts, about half of which is required to operate telescope systems, and during the daylight side of the path, the other half is used to recharge the 6 nickel hydrogen batteries. Shift Supervisor Pete Patero just checking with his control team, receiving a report that from the ground, as confirmed by the crew from orbit, the deploy activity so far is going very smoothly. We see no indications of any problems at this time.
And as you can see, Story, we've got 3 panels out.
Thanks, Lauren.
There are a total of 7 solar panel assemblies on each of the blankets, which indicates that we're just now passing the fourth panel. So we're over halfway to completion of the deployment of the port side solar array wing. We're now seeing the fifth panel being pulled from the cassette. Now clearly visible at each side of the array blanket are the bi-stems, which are made of a memory material. They're rolled flat in the cassette, and then as they are pulled from the cassette.
We saw it stop on its own, and then we executed item 2 immediately.
Thank you, Lauren.
And the silver mark denoting full deployment is just about exactly where it should be.
Thank you.
And motion was smooth and consistent throughout.
And we saw it down here.
Okay, you're in free drift now.
Thank you.
And with that confirmation that the orbiter is in free drift, the go-ahead has been given to send the commands that will actually start the motors deploying the starboard solar array wings. We're now receiving television, and we have wing motion.
Mark release.
And this is Hubble telescope control. The crew confirmed that we had release, and we have an indication that we have stopped at this point deployment of the secondary blankets. The team here is taking a look at data to determine exactly where we are at this point. Controller is in the process of sending the commands, which should start the actual unfurling of the solar array blanket. And we see the wings beginning to move.
We see motion.
So do we, Lauren.
As the blankets begin deploying, the orbital verification team is watching very closely the tension being placed on those wings so far. Looking good. We have an indication that we had an out of limits condition. The arrays have stopped their motion. And we have wing motion.
Okay, Houston, we see motion.
We've got the image down here, Lauren. And we like that view you're giving us.
Roger.
Director of Orbital Verification, Mike Harrington, reporting that deployment continuing to look good as the starboard wing is unfurled. Continuing to receive television from spacecraft as the starboard solar array blankets continue to unfurl. Deployment continuing to go smoothly.
Discovery, all is looking well. Could you zoom out now, please?
Roger that, Story.
And we're waiting for confirmation. We have confirmation that the solar array wing on the starboard side has been deployed. So we have good news. 1 day, 6 hours, 30 minutes mission elapsed time. We have full deployment of the starboard wing.
At Houston, we think it's stopped.
It's fully deployed. The micro switches confirm it.
Okay. You want item 2?
No item 2 required. Thank you.
Okay, roger.
Start. 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff. Discovery clears the tower. Rock and roll, Discovery.
Good morning, outer space, from all the human race. It's time to stow your sleeping gear. We know you had a blast, you're up in space at last. Now your main objective's clear. Deploy the space telescope to carry on our dreams and hopes. Space is our world. We're living our destiny. Space is our world. The spirit of discovery. Space is our world. 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 Space is our world.
Good morning, Discovery. Your wake-up music today is compliments of your training team. We want you to make them proud today. There are 17 pages of messages waiting for you in the tags, including a flight plan update with a new star pair C1 for your IMU align this morning. When you have the paper tray cleared, give us a call and we'll send another volley. We still have weather pictures and 2 more copies of the flight plan to go. We'll leave you alone for now and let you get ready for a big day.
Houston Discovery, KT, we copy all that, and we thank you and our training team for an outstanding wake-up music.
They're listening.
This is Mission Control Houston. This view live from the Alpha camera at the forward port location in the payload bay, looking aft along the robot arm as it's poised over and around the starboard side of the Hubble Space Telescope as Steve Hawley prepares to move in and grapple. And our PDRS officer here in the flight control room confirms via telemetry that the Hubble Space Telescope has been grappled. The end effector snares have closed and rigidized, and Hubble is now firmly in the grasp of Steve Hawley's robot arm.
And we've got you. There is enough light.
Okay, Story, well, welcome aboard.
Great picture. Puts me right up there with you.
This is Mission Control Houston. We're just about a minute away from passing out of range of the tracking and data relay satellite east, and as we do so, Discovery and its Hubble Space Telescope beginning to pass from day into darkness. Mission Specialist Steve Hawley has succeeded in rolling the Hubble Space Telescope 90 degrees around its longitudinal axis, is in the
process right now of elevating the telescope position to a high hover. Again, that's adjacent to the low hover position, but several feet higher to allow for clearance of the telescope when he begins the pitch down maneuver to pitch the aperture door end of the telescope down towards the payload bay and then back towards the OMS pods, which will set the stage for solar array deployment.
And this is Hubble Telescope Control in Greenbelt. We are now receiving television, non-standard television, from the spacecraft of the Hubble telescope at the end of the remote manipulator system. Clearly in the field of view is one of the two solar array packages still in the stowed position with both latches released.
Discovery, we'll take this attitude right here. I'd like you to go free drift for PDM deploy.
Roger, free drift.
And this is Hubble Telescope Control, Greenbelt. 1 day, 1 hour, 52 minutes mission elapsed time. Mission specialist Bruce McCandless has advised that they are seeing movement of the primary deployment mechanism. This motion will swing the 15-foot masts away from the side of the telescope.
And Houston, we still see good motion on the primary deployment.
Thank you, Lauren. We've got the TV down here.
Okay, good.
This Hubble Telescope Control, Greenbelt, 1 day, 1 hour, 54 minutes mission elapsed time. Continuing to receive television through the Vandenberg tracking station, and it is clearly showing the deployment of the solar array masts with the solar array package in the stowed position. The arrays are wound much like a pair of window shades around a roller, and kept in that configuration for launch. And once the primary deployment activity has been completed, the crew tweaks the attitude and replaces the vehicle in free drift. The operations team here will begin commanding the solar array blankets to unfurl. The solar array masts are deployed simultaneously, both the port and starboard masts, and in the field of view is the port solar array mast being deployed. The actual blankets, however, are unfurled one set of blankets at a time. This is Hubble Telescope Control, Green Belt. 1 day, 2 hours, 1 minute mission elapsed time. We're standing by now for telemetry confirmation that both of the solar array masts are fully deployed. We're anticipating that momentarily.
And Discovery, let us know if you need added maintenance.
We will, Lauren.
Roger that.
As soon as we get confirmation of PDM deploy, we'll recover the attitude using auto burns, but not yet. Houston for Charlie.
Go ahead, Story.
The only suggestions we got are to, cycle the connections, the pigtails on your signal conditioners. We have no other ideas.
Okay, I'll have them do that one more time. And I'll go up and recycle the diabed signal selectors.
Yeah, and it's not likely we wouldn't be getting both of them, but that's the only suggestion we have.
And we see first motion. Looks good.
And as the crew just confirmed, we're seeing both blankets beginning to unfurl on the port side solar array.
So far we see good smooth motion both sides.
And we got TV down here, Lauren.
Roger that.
It'll take approximately 7 to 8 minutes for this activity to be completed. The array is driven fairly slowly.
And Story, camera B also has a picture of this.
Thank you.
The solar arrays are driven out of their cassettes by bi-stems, which are at each side of the array. The bi-stem is visible in the television being downlinked from the spacecraft at this time. It's attached at the end of the array to a spreader bar, and the spreader bar is in turn attached to the array, which literally pulls the array out of the cassette, which held it packaged during launch. When fully deployed, both of the arrays together produce about 6,000 volts, about half of which is required to operate telescope systems, and during the daylight side of the pass, the other half is used to recharge the 6 nickel hydrogen batteries. Shift Supervisor Pete Patero just checking with his control team, receiving a report that from the ground, as confirmed by the crew from orbit, the deploy activity so far is going very smoothly. We see no indications of any problems at this time.
As you can see, Story, we've got 3 panels out.
Thanks, Lauren.
There are a total of 7 solar panel assemblies on each of the blankets, which indicates that we're just now passing the 4th panel, so we're over halfway to completion of the deployment of the port side solar array wing. We're now seeing the 5th panel being pulled from the cassette. Now clearly visible at each side of the array blanket are the bi-stems, which are made of a memory material. They're rolled flat in the cassette, and then as they are pulled from the cassette.
We saw it stop on its own, and then we executed item 2 immediately.
Thank you, Lauren.
And the silver mark denoting full deployment is just about, is exactly where it should be.
Thank you.
And that motion was smooth and consistent throughout.
And we saw it down here. Discovery, we'd like free drift for minus SDM deploy.
Okay, we copy free drift.
It's firm.
Okay, you're in free drift now.
Thank you.
And with that confirmation that the orbiter is in free drift, the go-ahead has been given to send the commands that will actually start the motors deploying the starboard solar array wings. We're now receiving television, and we have
okay, we had drum lock release.
And this is Hubble telescope control. The crew confirmed that we had release, and we have an indication that we have stopped at this point deployment of the secondary blankets. The team here is taking a look at data to determine exactly where we are at this point. A moment ago, we received observation from Commander Lawrence Shriver that he did not observe any difference between the array release on the starboard wing and the array release on the port wing, only that there was no further motion once the arrays were released. That was basically the same indication that was received here in the Space Telescope Operations Control Center. And again, the analysts, both from the European Space Agency, NASA, and others are taking a look at that situation at this time. And this is Hubble telescope control now that the vehicle's in free drift. Orbital verification team ops controller is in the process of sending the commands, which should start the actual unfurling of the solar array blanket. And we see the wings beginning to move.
We see motion.
So do we, Lauren.
As the blankets begin deploying, the orbital verification team is watching very closely the tension being placed on those wings so far. Looking good. And we have an indication that we had an out-of-limits condition. The arrays have stopped their motion.
This is Mission Control Houston. Flight controllers here in Mission Control Center discussing an impending deadline. Within about 13 minutes, we will reach a point of having concluded the pre-breathe, and in order to provide enough rapid response time to support an EVA that would enable an orbit 21 deploy, we would need to begin depressurizing the airlock in about 12 to 13 minutes from now. In the event that we can't satisfy the, or in the event that we're unable to complete the solar array deploy in that time, the option would be to go ahead and depress the cabin, or depress the airlock, and keep the crew inside the airlock in the suits, ready to move out immediately in the event that the EVA would be required to complete the deployment of the solar array, setting up a release on orbit 21. So flight controllers here in Houston standing by for some word from the stock as to whether or not they believe they can drive that array out in the next 15 minutes or so before we have to make that decision.
Discovery, free drift for minus SDM deploy.
Roger, free drift. And you're in free drift, Troy.
Thank you.
And with the orbiter in free drift, the orbital verification team is in the process of sending those commands to start the motors and resume deployment of the starboard wing. That request designed to provide the solar array team here in the stock with a better view of the corner of the solar array, which will give a visual indication if tension increases as the array is being deployed. And we have wing motion.
Okay, Houston, we see motion.
We've got the image down here, Lauren. And we like that view you're giving us.
Roger.
Director of Orbital Verification, Mike Harrington, reporting that deployment continuing to look good as the starboard wing is unfurled. Continuing to receive television from the spacecraft as the starboard solar array blankets continue to unfurl. Deployment continuing to go smoothly.
Discovery, all is looking well. Could you zoom out now, please?
Roger that, Troy.
And we're waiting for confirmation. We have confirmation that the solar array wing on the starboard side has been deployed. This Hubble telescope controlled green belt with the successful deployment of both solar array wings. The orbital verification team is now proceeding to activate the solar array drive electronics. Solar array solar array drive electronics provide control of the solar array, which drive the mechanisms to orient the arrays toward the sun. As the
Lauren.
Go ahead, Houston.
You can maneuver right to the release attitude right now. That's in the cap, page 3-20.
Page 3-20 will maneuver to the release attitude.
That's firm.
And then following activation of the solar array drive electronics, the solar array offload device will be released. This device removes the load from the solar array drive mechanism bearings during launch to prevent any damage to those bearing mechanisms. And basically, the sequence is started to release that system, the offload device, by heating a memory alloy element which deflects and causes first in a series of latches to release. Again, we're proceeding now with activation of the solar array drive electronics and a release of the offload device, which is one of a few steps that are required prior to clearing the way for release of the Hubble telescope today. At 1 day, 6 hours, 34 minutes mission elapsed time, this is Hubble telescope control in Greenbelt.
And in fact, we are receiving playback, and it started just after release.
Roger, that's where we thought it started.
Discovery Houston. Lauren, we'd like to know when you would like to schedule your PMC for this evening. We had one scheduled and we got a little behind, so we want to know when you'd like to do that. And also just a little reminder for Bruce or Kathy, the PCG seating needs to be complete by 9:45 to be activated properly.
Roger, we got it.
And Discovery, that should be your last PDI decom fail. This time the PI is off.
Roger that, Jim. And Jim, why don't you just leave the PMC where it's scheduled in the current flight plan, and we'll just interrupt long enough to talk.
Okay, then we'll do it per the schedule. Thanks.
Houston Discovery.
Go ahead, Lauren.
If you think our good friend Sonny Carter is still in the office, you might give him a call and see how much he wants for his watch.
Okay, we'll ask him about that. Is he going to give us a story behind this?
I'm sorry, you may not know the story. If he doesn't, well, maybe we can when we get back.
Okay, we'll let him know.
And do the words, "we have located it," mean anything?
Oh, I think it does. Okay, Lauren, thanks.
mission specialist Dr. Steve Hawley, who will be deploying the Hubble Space Telescope. Marine Colonel Charlie Bolden, the pilot for the mission. Air Force Colonel Lauren Schreiber, the mission commander. Dr. Catherine Sullivan, mission specialist. And Steve McCandless, Navy Captain, Bruce McCandless, mission specialist for STS-31, our 5 flight crew members. The mission emblem on the cake on the breakfast table, which is Discovery with the Hubble Space Telescope on a field of planets, stars, and galaxies. This is shuttle launch control at T-minus 3 hours and holding, approximately 9 minutes remaining in this built-in hold. We are watching the astronauts suit up. This is Commander Lauren Schreiber having his helmet attached. Schreiber is an Air Force colonel and is the mission commander. Here's Marine Colonel Charlie Bolden, the pilot, also having his helmet and communications attachments completed. There is Navy Captain Bruce McCandless. McCandless and Kathy Sullivan will be doing the contingency EVA on this flight should one be necessary to support Hubble Space Telescope operations in the event some anomaly should occur, such as a lack of solar panel deployment or some other problem which could be corrected by the crew before the telescope is deployed. Here's Dr. Kathy Sullivan awaiting the helmet attachment. Otherwise, her suit-up is essentially complete. And Dr. Steve Hawley ready to go. He will be operating the remote manipulator arm to deploy the Hubble Space Telescope on flight day 2. This is shuttle launch control at T-minus 2 hours, 56 minutes and counting. Going now to the astronaut quarters. The crew now headed for the elevator that will take them down to the first floor, where they'll board the Astrovan for the 20-minute ride out to Pad B. The commander and the pilot, Commander Schreiber and pilot Charlie Bolden, Bruce McCandless. This is a view of the orbiter access arm, and we can see our 5-member flight crew crossing from the fixed service structure into the White Room. There's Commander Schreiber. Check of his glasses. Schreiber is 45 years old, a colonel in the Air Force, selected as an astronaut candidate in 1978. He flew previously on STS-31C in 1985 on a 3-day Department of Defense mission. We're seeing astronaut Charlie Bolden being assisted now with his gear. He is 43 years old, a colonel in the Marine Corps, selected as an astronaut candidate in 1980. Next to enter will be Bruce McCandless and Kathy Sullivan.
OTC, OVCC. Go ahead. Yeah, our last crew members boarding at this time. Copy that.
This is shuttle launch control at T-minus 1 hour, 36 minutes and counting. We're approaching sunrise at the Kennedy Space Center. And we're looking at the Space Shuttle Discovery on Launch Pad 39B. The Hubble Space Telescope is in the payload bay with the payload bay doors closed at about 10:15 on Saturday night. We'll run a video now that shows Hubble Space Telescope processing at KSC. This is the vertical processing facility where Hubble was taken on the 4th of October. The telescope here shortly after arrival in the clean room in the horizontal position. Now being rotated to vertical. The two black antennas are the S-band communications antennas with the tracking and data relay satellites. Telescope now vertical. There are once again the S-band TDRS antennas. There are the solar panels attached to either side that will be deployed before releasing the telescope. Those are the attached fittings into the payload bay. One of the remote manipulator arm docking targets. And here are the technicians preparing the telescope for installation of the protective cocoon, which will go over the telescope to provide contamination protection during the 6 months that it will be undergoing testing.
All right, IPR on line item 80 has been updated to PR, and now line item 81.
Very top, there is a cover over the aperture door, which remained on the telescope until shortly before closing the payload bay doors for the first launch attempt. Again, the communications antennas, the pair of solar panels, the RMS docking targets, and below the service bays of the telescope that can be accessed by the astronauts to do any repair or refurbishment activities. This is the installation of the protective cocoon over the telescope. About 2/3 of the way through the flow, the liner was changed. During that time, there was a final contamination inspection, which is what we're witnessing there, a sample being taken. In December, the Wide Field Planetary Camera arrived from Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and here we see the installation into one of the service bays of the telescope itself. Overview of the Wide Field Planetary Camera. This is the protective cocoon that is shipped into KSC on a roller, suspended over the telescope, and then pulled down around the spacecraft. And here is the cocoon being lowered. This is preparation for shifting the telescope now in its protective cocoon to an adjacent test cell so that it can be placed into the payload canister for transportation to the launch pad.
Hi, good morning, OTC, MS2. Was with you with the radio.
After the telescope is in position in the test cell, then the payload canister will be moved into place directly in front of the telescope for the installation activities. And in these pictures, it's very obvious why they term that a cocoon. Here is the canister now that has been moved into place, transporter beneath it, which will take it out to the launch pad, which occurred at the end of March. Preparing now to move the canister back away from the test cell with the space telescope installed.
Good morning, NGD. This is MS2. Contact. Your line clear out. Thank you.
Doors being closed for transportation to the launch pad, and here in the payload changeout room, a gantry-like white room facility adjacent to the payload bay. Here's the final cleaning of the telescope after the cocoon has been removed.
All systems on channel 212, this OTC.
And this is the beginning of the installation activities. The telescope is extended on the payload ground handling mechanism, which is an extension device, a telescoping extension device, which can be moved forward, placing the telescope into the payload bay, and it will be locked into place by 4 retention latches. The payload ground handling mechanism being retracted, and the payload bay doors being closed prior to the first launch attempt.
OTC to 1. Go ahead. Yeah, per the clock.
This view from the flight deck, observing the port door being closed. With the payload test team below. Telescope in the payload bay at launch will weigh 22,322 pounds. And the starboard door coming closed.
That's affirmative, OTC, we're ready.
Okay. All systems on channel 212. Any conversation?
And of course,
channel 212 during astrocom check.
the doors were reopened later to remove the Hubble Space Telescope batteries to take them back to the battery lab for recharging during the stand down.
For air to ground 2, ICOM A, ICOM B, air to air for comfort, and do not change audio panel switch configuration. OTC, OVCC. Go ahead. Yes, sir. Hatch closure is complete. Leak check is good. Continuity check is good. We're ready for 2 PSI depressurization. Copy. DTD as well, I assume. That's affirmative.
Among the turnaround activities over the past week has been the removal of the batteries from the Hubble Space Telescope, and we will show you a video now of the activities surrounding the batteries. Here they have just been removed from the payload changeout room and have been placed on transportation carts to be taken down the elevators of the fixed service structure and taken to an awaiting truck for transportation to the battery lab, which is located in the vehicle assembly building. This occurred last Saturday night.
What's that, Jerry?
Each set of batteries, there are 2, there are 6 batteries in each set, and the set weighs about 400 pounds. This is the removal of the batteries from the payload changeout room and heading toward the elevators. This decision was made because the batteries can be charged in a colder environment in the battery lab than they can in the telescope on board Discovery. If these batteries are dropped to a temperature of 32 degrees Fahrenheit, then they will take on a charge very readily, and we would get more charge than we could get in the payload changeout room. We can supply a purge to the batteries of about 45 degrees while they're in the telescope in the payload bay. But if they're taken to the battery lab, then they can be dropped to freezing, where nickel hydrogen batteries charge easily, and a full charge could be obtained, where in the time available, probably not a full charge could be obtained at the pad under a 45-degree purge. The bottom line is that this gives us an extra day of contingency should we need it. We would have launch attempts through Saturday as far as Hubble Space Telescope is concerned, so as compared to our first launch attempt where we had 4 days, with our batteries now fully charged, we have 5. Batteries are a bridge between disconnecting the HST to orbiter umbilicals for deployment and the time that the solar panels are actually deployed on the telescope. Batteries also supply power while the telescope is in eclipse on the dark side of the Earth. This is the transfer aisle of the vehicle assembly building, and here you can see the truck arriving with the batteries for transportation to the lab.
Go ahead. Yes, sir. Okay, panel L2A1. Go ahead.
There's nothing unusual about the truck in which they're transported. It's a standard delivery truck.
And we're configured now. EZL. I can verify 650. Okay, you can perform your crew module for initial cabin 2 PSI leak check for sequence 45. EZL. Copy. We'll need a CMP here around 143.
Total charge time on the batteries while they were in the battery lab was 130 hours.
Cabin pressure. And CDR is to notify ECL cabin pressure master alarm. Cabin collapse and master alarm also down due to high cabin decay rate. Yeah, CDR, you copy that?
The payload bay doors of Discovery were closed during the battery charging activity to provide a very clean environment for the telescope. Class 100 air can be circulated around the telescope while the doors are closed. Much of the activity over the last week has been associated with changing out Discovery's #1 auxiliary power unit, which was removed last Saturday and sent back to the vendor for analysis. A new one was on hand and ready for installation, and we have video of that unit being prepared for transportation to the launch pad.
Discovery Houston, Simo Erdogan voice checks, Eddie Reed.
The auxiliary power unit, which presented the problem, was found to
After that, MS's 1, 2, and 3.
have a chip in one of the valves that's involved with regulating the flow of hydrazine. Therefore, what we found was a one-time hardware problem
MS3.
and not an overall design or engineering concern. This is the replacement auxiliary power unit being prepared for transportation. In the back, there is the one that was taken out and was shipped back to the vendor for analysis.
Altimeter setting of 30.
That is the aft area of Discovery where the replacement auxiliary power unit will be installed, and adjacent is the external tank and the solid rocket boosters.
Now what we're working, manual right now is a single string for TACANs.
The replacement
We're planning on going
unit was transported to the pad on Saturday and was connected
possibility of a 3,000
on Sunday. Most of that work was completed in time to give most of the team the rest of the Easter Sunday period off.
Primary TACAN back up again. We may yet declare banjo.
After the installation, the replacement auxiliary power unit was hot-fired, was run for a little over 5 minutes to verify that there would not be a repeat of the problem that we had before, and to give it the same amount of runtime as the other auxiliary power units which are on board Discovery. And that test went fine.
Okay, Steve, we copy. And CDR OTC, underground 1.
This now is going into the aft area for the installation. In parallel with this activity, the payload bay doors of Discovery were closed and the batteries for the Hubble Space Telescope were back in the battery lab being charged.
That's 4. Copy.
PFS is an Ops 1, no unexpected messages.
Copy that, thank you. And PLT, OTC.
Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, configure pass and BFS horizontal fit displays per your checklist, please.
Commander Schreiber has reported that the backup flight system is now in the proper mode. And we just saw astronaut Dan Brandenstein flying the shuttle training aircraft, doing the weather reconnaissance and assessing the conditions at the shuttle landing facility in the event of a return to launch site abort. He's reporting that data to support astronaut Ken Reichler and astronaut Jim Weatherby here in the firing room.
OTC, CVFS.
Go ahead.
T-minus 20 minutes, CPC dump is complete.
Copy that, CMQC is 979. Copy 979.
T-minus 12 minutes and counting, we've received word from White Sands that the weather reconnaissance aircraft there has advised that with the wind that they're seeing, there is still ample margin out there to cover any contingency in the event that we should have an abort once around. He has reported his observations to the chairman of the mission management team, Brewster Shaw, and Brewster has determined that weather at White Sands is go for launch.
This is NTD on 212, taking a status check for launch. Say go, no go for launch. OTC? Go. TVC? Go. PTC? Go. LPS? Go. Flight? Houston flight, NTD. Nala? Nala, NTD. STM? STM, let's go. Safety console. Would it be legal to call my lady? Safety console.
Now about 2 minutes into the T-minus 9-minute built-in hold. We'll go now to Mission Control in Houston for a readiness statement and also to the Space Telescope Operations Control Center at Goddard. They will report their readiness. Going now to Mission Control in Houston.
This is Mission Control Houston. Flight controllers in the Figure 1 room are ready for launch. The flight director for Ascent, Von Dittemore, just polled the room, and all positions reported they will be go for coming out of the T-minus 9-minute hold. One slight change to this morning's plans for launch. Ben Guerrier will be designated as the prime transatlantic landing site with Banjul as backup due to a problem with the primary TACAN system at Banjul. The secondary TACAN system is operational, but since weather is good at both sites, we will be choosing Ben Guerrier as the prime transatlantic landing site this morning. No other systems problems are reported, and all positions in Mission Control are standing by for launch. This is Mission Control Houston. We'll hand over now to Hubble Space Telescope Operations at Goddard.
Stem wheels, channel 118 X-ray.
This is Hubble Telescope Control Greenbelt. The Director of Orbital Verification, Mike Harrington, has confirmed that all control team positions here at the Space Telescope Operations Control Center in Maryland and the support team at the Huntsville Operations Support Center in Alabama are ready to support today's launch of the Hubble Space Telescope. Approximately 3 hours ago, the crew configured switches aboard the orbiter to provide essential power to 3 telescope systems. The telescope's receivers were powered to ensure that they are warm and on frequency to receive initial commands from the control center following launch. Heaters for the rate sensing units were powered to maintain the gyros at a stable temperature, and power was applied to the fixed head star tracker shutters to ensure that they remain closed during launch. Otherwise, the telescope is essentially powered down in Discovery's cargo bay and ready for launch. Beginning approximately 4.5 hours after launch, controllers here will begin sending commands to systematically activate the telescope systems in preparation for tomorrow's scheduled deployment. Again, all is ready here in the control center at Goddard Space Flight Center, Greenbelt, Maryland, and at the support center at the Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama, for today's launch of the Hubble Space Telescope.
T-minus 7 minutes, 30 seconds and counting.
TLS's go for orbiter access arm retract.
In about 45 seconds, the orbiter test conductor will give pilot Charlie Bolden a go to perform the auxiliary power unit pre-start. Bolden will configure switches in the cockpit to put the APUs in the ready-to-start configuration.
And OTC, PLT, APU start is complete, and so far so good.
There are the good words, 3 APUs in good health. Final purge sequence of the main engines is in work. We're now transferring to internal power and switching off the orbiter's ground power supply. Standing by now, here is the retraction of the gaseous oxygen vent hood. Gimbling of the main engines is complete, and the aero surfaces have been verified that they are positioned for launch. The external tank now is reported to be at flight pressure.
OTC 212. Close and lock your visors and initiate your O2 flow, and you all have a good trip.
Roger that, 10 work.
SDE, this is CMTS. We're going to make an attempt to cursor that valve closed. We've got the prereq set off. If this works, we should be in good shape. I copy. Proceed. Can work.
We have 7 minutes of runtime available on the auxiliary power units. We've been holding now about 2 minutes and 20 seconds.
SDE, this is CMTS. The valve is closed. We'll go.
There's the confirmation that we have successfully recycled.
The pickup terminal sequence MPS. That's affirmative, so we'll go. We're in good shape. Okay, you have a go to proceed. GLS, pick up the count immediately.
I copy. Mark. TLS's go for auto sequence start.
We are go for start.
25.
Booster hydraulic power units have started.
20.
Sound suppression water system has started.
15.
T-minus 13 seconds.
10.
T-minus 10, go for main engine start. We are go for main engine start. T-minus 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery with the Hubble Space Telescope, our window on the universe.
Mission Control, Houston.
Roll program.
Roger, roll, Discovery.
The roll maneuver puts the vehicle in the proper launch plane. Guidance officer confirms a good roll maneuver. Engines now throttling back. The throttle down maneuver assists in reducing the aerodynamic loads on Discovery as it passes through the area of maximum dynamic pressure. Velocity now 1,200 feet per second. Discovery downrange 3 nautical miles.
Discovery, go at throttle up.
All 3 engines now throttled back up.
Go throttle up.
Engines at 104%. The go at throttle up call signifies that all systems are performing well. All 3 auxiliary power units look good. Discovery's velocity now 2,300 feet per second and is downrange 8 nautical miles. Standing by for SRB separation. And both solid rocket boosters have separated. Discovery's velocity now 4,300 feet per second at a downrange distance of 35 nautical miles.
And this is Mission Control Houston at 3 hours 2 minutes into the flight of Discovery. We're now seeing payload bay views from camera A. That's on the forward bulkhead of Discovery looking aft.
Discovery Houston, we're getting some real good payload bay television downlink, and we see that Steve has been hard at work getting the RMS deployed.
Okay, I copy. And you want those done now?
You can do the ones that are going off on time.
Okay, I'll do the ones going off on time. Boiler controller number 2 is going to Bravo.
Okay, Charlie, thanks, and we'll let you know if this one works.
And this is Mission Control. We're now looking from payload bay camera B straight up at the end effector of the remote manipulator system arm as the end effector goes through its checkout.
Roger, Charlie, we concur, and your go to begin your depress.
This is Mission Control Houston at 4 hours 22 minutes. The crew's been given the go to begin the...
And Bruce, you can take the airlock depress valve as soon as she's complete with that to 5.
The crew's been given a go to depress the cabin from the 14.7 psi level to the 10.2 level, as we are seeing payload bay views from the remote manipulator system arm as as mission specialist Steve Hawley does a photo survey of the Hubble Space Telescope.
Now in the field of view, one of the two grapple fixtures mounted to the Hubble Space Telescope. One of these fixtures will be used by Steve Hawley tomorrow to grapple the telescope with the remote manipulator system to lift it out of the payload bay.
We have an exciting discovery on the long-range optics from Vandenberg Air Force Base at a velocity of Mach 8.4, 156,000 feet.
Discovery Houston, no action on FCS SAT.
Roger that.
Discovery Houston, take TACANs.
Roger, take TACAN.
This is Mission Control. The unusual background color on the long-range optics
Discovery,
is...
re-enable PTIs.
The unusual background color on our video of Discovery is because they're using a low light level camera, and it's slightly out of adjustment. Discovery's velocity now Mach 6, altitude 133,000 feet, 181 miles away from Edwards.
Discovery Houston, state vector transfer to the BFS, please.
Transfer inward.
Mission Control. A guidance, navigation, and control officer confirms that the air data probes are deployed at the front of the vehicle. Those probes sense the atmospheric pressure around Discovery and aid in updating its navigation information. Velocity is now Mach 4. Altitude is 106,000 feet. This is Mission Control. Discovery now in its final roll reversal, a left to right maneuver. Velocity is now Mach 2.9, 90,000 feet altitude.
Discovery Houston, take air data to GNC.
Roger, air data, GNC.
This is Mission Control. The Flight Dynamics Officer provides the latest weather update. Winds at the landing site runway 22 are presently southwest, 9 gusting to 13 knots. The computation of the headwind and crosswind comes out to a left crosswind of 5 knots and a headwind of 12 knots. All these are well within limits for landing.
Discovery Houston, take air data to nav.
Roger, air data coming to nav.
Velocity Mach 1.5, 68,000 feet altitude. Discovery about 5 minutes from touchdown, only about 35 miles out from Edwards. Velocity now Mach 1, altitude 48,000 feet.
Discovery Houston, you're looking good. Approaching the hack. No change to forecast altimeter. Winds 200 at 9 gust 13.
Roger, 2009 gust to 13.
Discovery, state vector transfer to BFS, please.
This is Mission Control. Discovery's velocity now 700 feet per second as it comes around the heading alignment circle. Discovery will make a left overhead turn to line up over runway 22. Flight Dynamics Officer reports Discovery looks good, turning around the heading alignment circle exactly on the track.
Yeah, Houston, Discovery, we do have the field in sight.
Roger that, Discovery.
Discovery now at 14,000 feet, making the final approach, lining up over runway 22. And Discovery is on the glide slope, converging on the center line. Coming up now for the pre-flare maneuver at 2,500 feet. Current altitude about 6,800 feet. Landing gear is down and locked. Main gear touchdown. Nose gear touchdown. Discovery rolls out on runway 22 at Edwards at the end of mission STS-31 after traveling 2,068,213 statute miles on this mission. Mechanical Systems Officer reports steady braking. The normal amount of braking is about 8 to 10 feet per second. And this detailed test objective today is designed to be a light braking or low energy braking to try out the new carbon brakes. Wheel stop.
Houston, Discovery, wheel stop.
Roger that, Discovery. Welcome back. Congratulations on a super mission, and the world is looking forward to reaping the benefits of your good work over the next 15 years. Welcome back, guys, and we have no post-landing deltas.
Okay, thank you, Steve, and we sure enjoyed it also. It was great fun.
It sure looked like it.
Houston Discovery to Skynet Spiro's safety pins in.
Roger, Lauren, understand safety pin is in. Thanks. Discovery Houston, no action for you on APU-1 message. We should be able to get through main engine repositioning with the fuel we have in APU-1.
Okay, I copy, Steve.
This is Mission Control. The crew is coming down the steps now. Being greeted by Don Putty. This is Mission Control. The STS-31 crew poses for a photo before boarding the astronaut van.